That's not talking about Matt Schneidman, because I still don't have a great feel for what Jordan Love's going to do with the football, and sometimes that's a good thing. I'm Matt Schneidman. He's Doug Russell. This is the Matt Schneidman Show, Tuesday, October 22nd. I was talking with John Kuhn earlier today on our Breaking the Stick podcast, which is out now wherever you get your podcast. Go listen to it. And he, and I kind of agree, thinks overwhelmingly that the way Jordan Love is playing is a good thing. And I definitely tend to lean toward that way because, as we talked about on yesterday's show, nobody wants to reel back Jordan Love, because if you reel back that aggressiveness, he's not going to be making the plays that he's making on the good side of that spectrum. We'll see what he has in store for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll get into some of that matchup later today. I did not text Wayne Larrivee yet. I just woke up from a nap, so hopefully Wayne is not napping when we call him for our weekly Tuesday visit with him to start the second segment. We'll spring it on him, and if he forgot, that's on him, but also a little bit on me for not texting him. Jordan Love, speaking of the Packers quarterback, probably won't have the hardest go of it on Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And John and I were also talking, who starts for the Jaguars? And let me double check that he starts, because I want to make sure I get this right before I say it. 2024 Jacksonville Jaguars snap counts. Darnell Savage has played 40.38% of them. So he plays.
Yeah.
He plays. We were wondering how many times the Packers specifically target him when he's in the game.
Probably a few. There's a reason he's not in Green Bay anymore.
5 years, though. John was surprised. Like, not surprised, but I asked him, were there any players or any times during John's lengthy time with the Packers where a player who you knew wasn't very good went off to another team, and then Mike McCarthy said, let's go after that guy? And John said, like Savage, no, because if there was a mediocre player, he wasn't here for 4 years like Savage was. Savage was here for 5.
Mm-hmm.
They paid him almost $9 million on his 5th-year option, and he made the PFWA All-Rookie team in 2019 and then just never really panned out into that consistent playmaking safety that the Packers thought he would be when they drafted him in the first round in 2019.
Well, the Packers were a pretty elite team when John was around, too. They won a Super Bowl one year and went 15-1 the next. So, yeah, they were pretty good, had pretty good quarterback. Yeah, they were a decent team when John was here.
So, speaking of Jordan Love, the Jacksonville Jaguars are tied for 29th in the NFL in takeaways with 3. Their blitz rate, meaning sending 5 or more rushers. Now, technically, it's a blitz if Xavier McKinney rushes off the edge, but they're still only rushing 4. The only thing that's technically not a blitz is when they just rush 4 fewer defensive linemen. But True Media considers a blitz anything with 5 or more rushers. So 4 rushers, even if it's the replacement fire zone with McKinney rushing instead of Preston Smith, like was the case on McKinney's sack, that is not considered a blitz according to True Media. So Jacksonville Jaguars, 32nd in the NFL in blitz rate. Nobody blitzes less than them. Sack percentage, 25th. Pressure percentage, 23rd. Tied for 29th in takeaways. 30th in points allowed per game. Jordan Love's going to be airing that sucker out on Sunday, I think, Doug.
You would think. I mean, Jacksonville's 2-5 for a reason. They're just not a very good football team. There's holes all over the field with them. You thought that, at the beginning of the season, they felt like they had their guy at quarterback, and I'm not sure what the future holds for Trevor Lawrence, except for, his bank account. I know what his future holds for that, and it's pretty good.
The future is looking bright for Trevor Lawrence.
At least in that aspect. I don't know if that's going to help him get any wins. Probably not. It's just a bad situation down there, and I don't know what you trace it back to. I know that Doug Peterson's probably going to pay the price for it. I don't know that that's necessarily his fault. I know that they've got an owner who's tried a couple of different things and, swung and missed at a couple of really big things, including Urban Meyer, probably most famously. But yeah, there's not a lot of patience with Shad Khan down there. So I get it why sometimes the head coach has to walk the plank, but that organization from top to bottom is just a disaster. Finally, it looks like they may be getting a new stadium down there, which is desperately needed. But yeah, I mean, Jacksonville is, in terms of the National Football League, The only thing that makes it relevant to the front office, to Fifth Avenue, is the fact that they're so willing to go over and play in London. Beyond that, they may be the most irrelevant franchise in the National Football League. And that also may make them dangerous because everybody's looking past them, but they're also still 2-5. And they did win against the Patriots on Sunday, but the Patriots are wretched too. So take that for what it's worth.
So the Jaguars' run defense isn't terrible, at least from an efficiency perspective. 14th in defensive rush EPA per snap. And for anyone new to this show, and maybe there is one or two of you out there, defensive rush EPA per snap measures the efficiency of your run defense on a per snap basis. That's a true media stat that I obviously like to use. For example, yards per carry isn't the most telling stat in my mind because if it's 3rd and 1 and you allow 2 yards, that's only 2 yards per carry. That's very good. But it also didn't get the job done. The other team got a first down. So EPA is expected points added, measures the effectiveness of every play pretty much. So 2 yards allowed on 3rd and 1 isn't, considered great, as great as 2 yards per carry is. So the Jaguars rank 14th in defensive rush EPA per snap. Packers rank 17th. That's just about, other than turnovers, because the Jags have turned the ball over 7 times. Packers have turned it over 11. The only category, the only significant one where the Jaguars have the edge. I'm about to tweet this out, but Jordan Love, he's obviously not looking at true media, but Jaguars 32nd in defensive pass EPA per dropback, so pass defense efficiency on a per play basis. 32nd in blitz rate, 25th in sack percentage, tied for 29th in takeaways, 30th in scoring defense. Jordan Love should have himself a day. And I want to lead into this conversation with that because the Packers should win. They should put up a lot of points. I'm picking Packers 31-17. But I asked John this earlier. Trap game is something that we in the media talk about just kind of as a concept to represent a lesser opponent before a bigger opponent. This is the exact definition of a trap game for the Green Bay Packers, a team that's 2-5, one of the worst teams in the league on the road. And then the week after that, it's the Detroit Lions coming to Lambeau Field. So this is the definition of a trap game. But I asked John, I said, did Mike McCarthy ever utter the word trap game? Is that a thing inside locker rooms? And he said, absolutely not.
No, because you always want to respect your opponent. You and I can disrespect. Now, John's a member of the media as well. You and I can disrespect the opponent. Fans can disrespect the opponent. The moment that gets into the locker room, I mean, I don't know that I'm a huge fan of, it's bulletin board material. I don't, sometimes I think that's overblown. But you also don't want that even floating out there because you still have the task at hand. And you know what the schedule looks like moving forward after this game, and it tightens up a lot. This is a game, listen, my feelings on must-win games. This is not a must-win game. Be a pretty embarrassing loss, though, for the Packers if they do take the Jaguars lightly and Jacksonville comes out with their A game. The old adage of any given Sunday, I mean, it's true. We've seen it before. I mean, the year that the Packers, the year after the Packers won Super Bowl 31 and they went to Super Bowl 32. It's the ultimate for old school Packers fans of a certain age. They will remember this trap game more than any other. It's against Indianapolis, who didn't have a win at the time. And I think it was I'm looking in the media guide right now, about week 10 or so. The Colts were like 0-9. The Packers were rolling. They had only had 2 losses, so they were 7-2 or 8-2, and they rolled into the Hoosier Dome and got beat by a terrible Indianapolis Colts team who were well on the way to the worst record in the NFL and drafting Peyton Manning number 1 overall the next season. And they lost 41-38. It happens. And sometimes, as you know, I like to use history as a guide. That's the ultimate trap game history as a guide because the Packers did not take the Colts seriously that day, and they got beat by a terrible football team.
We've seen it happen plenty. I mean, last year's game, speaking of more recent history, between the Packers and Giants wasn't necessarily a trap game because it wasn't like the Packers were some great team. They had just come off those wins against the Lions and the Chiefs. And then it was, okay, they just beat those teams. They're going to take care of the Giants, continue on their merry way to making this great second half turnaround to the playoffs. Then they go and lay an egg on both sides of the ball against the Giants.
Clunkers happen, man.
That's what got Tommy DeVito all those endorsement deals with pizza chains and everything. So you got to show up to play. That's why they say this is what should happen on paper, because these are still professionals. They're still paid. You still got to line them up. I believe the Packers were -4.5 on the opening line. That just smells like a trap game. As a sports bettor myself, when that line comes out and you're like, whoa, 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 what's going on there? That doesn't necessarily mean Vegas knows something, but they just feel it in their bones that it's a trap game. Will the Packers come out and shut that down right away? It's possible. If they win the toss, they certainly ain't receiving, because in recent history, they've I was surprised they did it against the Texans. We didn't ask Matt LaFleur yesterday why, but they chose to receive against the Lions on Thanksgiving last year. Normally, you receive when you want to make a statement, strike first against a team that you're not supposed to beat. That's exactly what the Packers did. They might have done that against the Cowboys too in the playoffs, and the Lions on Thanksgiving. Against the Texans, it was like, I don't think you really needed to do that, considering the teams were on relatively even footing. They certainly, especially after how Sunday went, they ain't doing that in Jacksonville if they win the toss. I can tell you that right now. And I'd be willing to put some money on that. But I'm not allowed to bet on the NFL, so I'm not going to.
No prop bets? Not even prop bets?
I don't know. I'll check with my bosses.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Yeah, look, I mean, we can go through Jacksonville all you want. This is a game that is on the schedule, so it's the next important game. But you look ahead. You've got Detroit coming up. They've got Detroit twice still to play. You've got the rematch with the Vikings. You've got the Bears a couple of times coming up. I still think that San Francisco, even though the record may not necessarily reflect it, they're a quality opponent, and they're still on the schedule coming up. So there are some really big, important games, and I don't think that, if the Packers do lose to the Jaguars, I wouldn't predict that. I don't make predictions, as you know. But even if they do lose to the Jaguars, I don't think their season is over. It's just kind of embarrassing. And I don't know if I necessarily believe in the wake-up call either this early in the season. We're still about midway through. But it's a game that they just should win. It just is. Mm-hmm. And you just hope that if you're a Packers fan or if you're betting on them, that they realize that. I think they do. They're coached really well, and I don't think that coaching staff or the leaders in that locker room are going to allow complacency to set in looking ahead to the next week against the Lions, or God forbid, even the next week after that, which is the bye week.
You know who's played the 8th most special team snaps for the Jacksonville Jaguars this year?
Is it Darnell Savage?
Josiah DeGuara.
Okay, that tracks. Yeah, okay. So Josiah DeGuara and Darnell Savage are now contributing members of the Jacksonville Jaguars. That tracks. That's about right.
Have some respect. He's played 29 offensive snaps. He lasted 4 years in Green Bay. Hey, he's on the 5th year of his NFL career.
Yeah, because he's a third-round pick, and they didn't want to admit the mistake. Josiah DeGuara was not he was not a good player for the Packers. He just wasn't.
I remember when Matt LaFleur spoke on the conference call during the 2020 draft, and they had just taken Jordan Love, and he's like, Jesus, hell, I am, having to deal with all this stuff. And then Josiah DeGuara comes, and Matt LaFleur's like, finally, this is my guy. We're going to use him like Kyle Juszczyk. This is what we want.
Nope.
Never really panned out. But good for Josiah DeGuara.
Luke Fickell loves him. Luke Fickell loves Josiah DeGuara. Oh.
Yeah, former Cincinnati. Yep. Yeah.
Talked to him about that last year when he first got hired, and he's like, he was so good for us. He was so good for us. Well, I'm glad he was good for you. I didn't say that, but it's kind of what I was thinking. Luke Fickell loves the guy, though.
Well, so does Doug Peterson, or whoever the Jaguars special teams coordinator is. I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head. After the break, we're going to get the voice of the Packers, Wayne Larrivee, on the line. Odds that he does not pick up your call, Doug.
He usually does. I would say that I can count on.
Well, that's because I normally text him.
True, but even when you don't, he usually picks up. Sometimes he's a little confused. One time he was really sleepy. So I'm very, very convinced that I woke him up, even though he didn't admit that I woke him up. But he's, except for I think once, maybe twice, he's always picked up. So we'll see.
Well, let's hope he does. That's after the break, right here on the Match Schneidman Show. Stick with us on the game. Back on the Matt Schneidman Show, Tuesday, October 22nd. And you know what Tuesdays mean? Our weekly visit with the voice of the Packers, Wayne Larrivee. Wanted to keep him on his toes this week, so I didn't text him, seeing if he was okay for his weekly Tuesday segment. Wayne, did we catch you off guard? Are you busy doing something else? Do you need to go?
Is he there?
Uh-oh. Oh, boy.
Hold on. No.
Doug got him on the line during the commercial break.
Yeah. Wayne, you there? I'll call him back.
Well, no better time to refresh one of my favorite memories from covering a game in Jacksonville. It actually wasn't Packers-Jaguars. It was Packers-Saints when a hurricane displaced the Saints. I believe it was the 2021 season opener. Packers lost 38-3, and Brian Gutekunst was laughing when his team was down 35, but not because of anything that was happening on the field. It was because a large portion of the Saints press/media team were loudly cheering in the press box. And you might say, Matt, stop whining. I get that, but there's some professional courtesy that goes on in press boxes. Before every game, no matter what stadium, the press box PA announcer says, no cheering in the press box. If you do, you risk losing your credential. Well, it was late in the game. Saints were running the Packers out of the building, and Rob Domofsky had enough with the Saints media team and the Saints press people cheering very loudly. So Rob screamed something along the lines of, we're working over here, be quiet, or something. And it was dead silent in that press box after he did it. And Goody kind of just started laughing. His team lost by 35, but he got a good laugh out of it. Is Wayne here?
Yeah, I think so. But we've had some issues with the phones over the last 72 hours or so. So if he's not there, it's on us and not Wayne, because Wayne was ready to go. So
Wayne, do we have you?
Okay, so that's on us. Our phones are still kind of messed up. So we are unable to connect with Wayne, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
So
you want to text him saying thank you, but no thank you?
He says he can hear us, so I think he can hear us, but I will text him anyway.
Well, we can't hear him, so that would be an issue right here.
Right. That's it has to go both ways for a conversation, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I'm gonna go ahead and drop Wayne right now, and I will text him our apologies.
That was unfortunate. I was looking forward to talking Yankees with him. Oh, well. Let's talk Packers-Jaguars. It's interesting because Travis Etienne came to the Jaguars as obviously Trevor Lawrence's teammate. Believe they came out the same year, and Etienne was a first-round pick in the 2021 draft, obviously, and then Trevor Lawrence was the number 1 overall pick in that draft. Etienne has kind of been replaced by Tank Bigsby's production. You know, I'm reading an ESPN story right now. Etienne still RB1 despite Bigsby's big game. Well, Tank Bigsby, 415 rushing yards on the season. Etienne, 230. Etienne's played 1 fewer game. Bigsby, 6.2 yards per carry. Young guy out of Auburn. He's kind of taken on that role. And man, I did a roundtable. Look out for this tomorrow morning. Roundtable with our other NFC North beat writers, since obviously that's the best division in football. And I was asked, what is one area that you think could trip up your team? And I said, you could not have watched the first 7 games from the Packers and just said run defense, and you would have been right. Because although it's not bad in terms of an efficiency perspective, like I said earlier in the show, 17th in rush defense EPA per snap, it's always going to be run defense with the Packers. Last year they were 13th, but they still ranked 31st. From 2019 to 2023, Matt LaFleur's first 5 years on the job, despite how much they improved last season and the last year under Joe Barry. A little bit worse in that one metric under Jeff Hafley. They've been run over to some degree by the likes of Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon. So really the respectable running backs. The other ones they've faced, let's see, Tony Pollard, James Conner, and then Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams had some success, but the Packers, I think we just have to face they're never going to be a good run defending team. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but they've changed personnel, they've changed coordinators, they've played in different stadiums. It's like that 2019 NFC Championship game against the 49ers where they allowed 285 on the ground, 220 to Raheem Mostert. I think it was like 186 before contact or something. The Smith brothers couldn't set an edge to save their lives. it's like that did irreparable damage to the Packers franchise when it comes to run defense. So at this point, if they keep taking the ball away and limiting these explosive passing plays like they have the past couple weeks and, getting after the quarterback, maybe it's okay if teams run on them. But, Tank Bigsby, the 23-year-old out of Auburn, has kind of surpassed Travis Etienne. I almost said Trevor. I think Trevor's running back for Georgia. Maybe it's his younger brother. He's kind of surpassed him as the number one producer in the Jaguars backfield, even if Travis is still number one on the depth chart. So maybe the Packers have to watch out for him. Maybe that's how the Jaguars keep this one close. They have good players. They just aren't a good team. And sometimes that happens in the NFL.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, with the Packers and their run defense, I don't know if it's a matter of they're just never going to be good at it. And you go back to, the Raheem Mostert game, and that was the highlight of his career, other than scoring 21 touchdowns last year and making himself a fantasy darling for a 1-year jump up. But beyond that, it's kind of baffling to me how they aren't better at it, but they've also gone up against some guys that are real players, some real studs. I mean, you can talk about Joe Mixon getting over 100 last week, and Joe Mixon's a great running back for, one example. And you mentioned Kyron Williams, and James Conner's a quality back. I'm not too concerned about it because it's not even the de-emphasization on, the run game in the NFL. Certainly it's still an important part, but this league has become so pass happy. So if you do have more success in that area, I think it's not perfect, but at least I think it can be sustainable. And the Packers have shown that, at 5-2 right now, with all the takeaways that they've been getting, they can be effective at that part of it and just kind of contain the run as best as you can. And if you can take away that other aspect of it, you can give your offense a chance to win. And by and large, for the most part, they've done that this year.
Yeah, I think it was important that the Packers, not for their own confidence, but just because it was unclear if they could, like you said, Doug, keep up, winning when they weren't taking the ball away. And Jair Alexander, we've, said what he said on this show, that they're still going to, go after the ball 100%, even if they, know that it may not always be sustainable to win that way. But they beat one of the best teams in the NFL without taking the ball away. So I think for that reason, it's telling, and obviously in a good way for this defense, that they didn't stop the run particularly well. They didn't take the ball away. They threw 2 interceptions, muffed a punt return. If I told you all that, you would have said Packers got their asses kicked.
Mm-hmm.
No, they beat one of the best teams in the NFL 24-22. Now I understand that team didn't have their number one wide receiver and a couple key pieces on defense. Packers still won the game. It's still a very good team without those people. So they still had Stephon Diggs, their offensive line, Tank Dell, Joe Mixon, Dameon Pierce, C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, Daniil Hunter, Derek Stingley.
Those are all good players. Those are all quality NFL players. The Texans, I'm not predicting them to, go to the Super Bowl or anything, but that's a playoff team you're talking about right there, with or without Nico Collins.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like I said, the Packers they were kind of in the same boat as the Bears going into last weekend. They hadn't beaten a great team yet. And that's kind of the commentary on the Bears right now, is they haven't beaten anybody good. They're 4-2, but they haven't beaten anybody good. Packers were kind of flying under the radar in that regard. They had beaten the Colts, the Titans, the Cardinals, and the Rams.
Yeah.
They lost to the Eagles and the Vikings. Now here come the Texans, even though they're banged up, like you said, they still fall into the category of a good team, and the Packers beat them, especially when they, had gaping holes in their game in all 3 facets, and they still won. So for the long-term success of the Packers, I think last week was important. If that win happened against a lesser team, it's, okay, you should have beat that team, but you struggled. It's okay, you beat a good team and you struggled. That's a good sign for the future.
Yeah, like you said, though, it's not sustainable, especially with the way that their schedule is going to get a lot tougher. I mean, the Texans are a quality team. We've talked about that. But with those other teams we were talking about in the last segment that's still coming up, Detroit twice, the rematch with Minnesota, Chicago twice, those divisional teams, San Francisco still a quality opponent. There aren't that many bunnies that are left on this schedule. The schedule.
No such thing as a bunny.
Well, I mean, you might say that Jacksonville's as close as you're going to get. But those guys get paid too. Those kids are on scholarship too, as they say.
Yeah.
So any given Sunday, any other cliche you want to throw in there. But their schedule is a lot more stout in the second half than it was in the first half, I would say.
Yeah, I think obviously going back to the Giants game last year, you can't overlook any team. They had Tommy DeVito, and we said, the Packers just beat two of the best teams in the NFL, the Lions and the Chiefs. They're easily going to win this game. Nope. That was a different Packers team, though. I think a narrative around this Packers team, and I love that word narrative, that's sarcasm, was that in the early years of the Matt LaFleur era, they would get down early, abandon the run, be soft, not really fight back. I think that Vikings game was one of the most telling games this season, even though they lost. Even though that was, probably their worst.
It was the worst half of football.
It was easily their worst half of football, but, that was the worst they played for any sort of stretch this season. But the way they fought back in a game they were once down 28 and only lost by 2 and even missed 2 field goals in that game, that was probably the second most telling game for the Packers this season behind this one against the Texans to still win despite playing poorly in a couple different phases. So I think this is a different Packers team in terms of makeup, in terms of fight, all those intangible things, which is why I think this team's less susceptible to a trap game, if you will. Looking at their schedule, they got the Jaguars, the Lions at home, then the bye, then at Chicago, home against the 49ers, home against the Dolphins, at the Lions, at the Seahawks, home against the Saints. That could be a trap game. Mm-hmm. The Saints stink.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost 5 straight. At the Vikings, then home against the Bears. So you're probably right. This is probably the worst opponent on paper. Again, on paper, that the Packers have left on their schedule. But they have some pieces. Brian Thomas Jr., the first-round rookie receiver, 513 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. He leads them in both categories. Gabe Davis, the former Bills deep threat who the Jaguars signed in free agency. Christian Kirk, who made a lot of money in free agency. He can still make plays. Evan Engram, who had 114 catches last year, 4th in the league. He's a tight end who Trevor Lawrence likes to target. Trevor Lawrence, I know after they lost their first game in London to the Bears 2 weeks ago, there was a video going around on Twitter after Lawrence, didn't have a great game by stat line. It showed a couple times the Jaguars dropped Trevor Lawrence's passes in the end zone or on plays that would have been touchdowns 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe Trevor Lawrence isn't playing as bad as the numbers indicate, but I think you're still kind of waiting for him to be like, okay, this is the guy we paid. I think they paid him $55 million.
Yep.
A year as well. He's making what Jordan Love's making.
He's making 55. There's 3 of them, Burrow, Love, and Lawrence.
There you go. That's the price of doing business these days. And one of them's 2-5. One of them's 5-2. The other is, I think the Bengals are 3-4 right now.
That sounds about right.
So all things considered, and I think Joe Burrow is playing well. It's just his defense isn't very good. All things considered, I think Jordan Love is doing just fine. And like we said before he signed that contract, it's going to seem relatively cheap in a couple of years once guys keep getting paid, once CJ Stroud gets paid, once, this next class of quarterbacks gets their extensions. Who else? Brock Purdy, CJ Stroud in a couple of years. $55 million is going to look like chump change.
Yeah.
And then guys like, maybe Josh Allen and other guys like that are going to renegotiate. And, I don't know exactly.
What was the deal that Dak got? Like. Because Dak got a big deal finally.
Yeah,
too.
Dak got 60, I believe.
Yeah. So I kind of forgot
he's
about
still
him.
On that. But, if the Packers win a Super Bowl, nobody will care about these interceptions from Jordan Love. They'll say he was worth it because if they win one, he'll be a big reason why.
Well, and you look at the second half of last season, and he took care of the football. He only threw, I think, 1 interception in the second half of the season. And that's what, in no small measure, that $55 million was kind of like, okay, yeah, we get it. If he's going to be the second coming of Aaron Rodgers, absolutely. Now you've seen, even with missing a couple of, now I know he's got as many touchdowns as anybody by missing 2 games, but also, as we talked about on yesterday's show, he's got as many interceptions as anybody in the NFL with missing 2 games.
I think
too.
Baker Mayfield passed him in touchdown passes yesterday.
Oh yeah, you're right, he did. But Baker Mayfield, he throws a lot of interceptions too.
Yes, he does.
So, I mean, I'm not going to say that taking care of the football isn't important, because it obviously is, but again, Baker Mayfield has had a really good season overall. And yeah, he'll take a couple of the picks. He's shown himself to be a pretty darn good quarterback. And I know it took a little while for him to kind of make it in the NFL. He's bounced around a few teams in the NFL, but it seems like he's finally found a home. With Jordan Love, he didn't have to do that, but yeah, he's thrown a few more picks. He's taken a few more chances. And even that touchdown pass that he threw to Tucker Kraft, I mean, that was in traffic, man. That was, I don't know how that didn't get picked off.
Yeah, I think it went through the safeties.
Yeah, it did. And
that safety, Kalen Bullock, who later intercepted Jordan Love, actually tweeted about that. Never a good idea to get on Twitter after you lose. Someone tweeted a video of that touchdown throw to Tucker Kraft and said, "What a perfect throw." And Kalen Bullock responded saying, "What do you mean it went through my hand?" So
yeah, it wasn't a perfect throw. It was a great catch by Kraft.
I would, piece of advice to Kalen Bullock. He's obviously a good young safety, rookie, picked off Jordan Love. If you lose, just stay off social media altogether. Not that, I should be one to give this advice, but to pick a throw where it went through your hands, like, aren't you kind of telling on yourself? Like, you're wrong. I just dropped it. It wasn't a good throw.
Shows what you know.
Come back with that.
That's a good point. No, it wasn't a good throw. I should have had it intercepted, but I didn't, because I dropped it. But it was, I mean, I still don't know how it got through all that traffic. I asked Tucker Kraft after the game, it's like, how do you track a ball like that? Do you just kind of tune out all of the noise? Do you tune out all of that traffic, or do you just kind of, catch, have your eye on the ball? It's like, it just happened so fast. He didn't really give me much of an answer. Just, it just happened so fast that, I just put my hands where I thought the ball was going to be, and I was fortunate enough to hold on. Okay, I'll take that. I still don't know how it got through traffic. I don't know in the moment, and then especially after watching that replay, the same one that you're talking about, that shot from the end zone. Incredible catch. Laser beam of a throw. Maybe that's how it got through traffic. I'm not sure, but it very easily could have been INT number 3.
Interceptions are kind of in vogue now. Patrick Mahomes, 8. Aaron Rodgers, 7. Kirk Cousins, 7. Baker Mayfield, 7. Brock Purdy, 7. Jordan Love, 8. Dak Prescott and Geno Smith, 6. Sam Darnold, 5. Like, that's the new way to play quarterback. Just sling it around the yard.
Maybe.
Throw some picks, okay. But come back with a touchdown pass. I mean, of the 3 guys that have 8 interceptions leading the league, Gardner Minshew has 4 touchdown passes. Patrick Mahomes has 6. Jordan Love is 15.
Yeah.
So he's if you have a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, I mean, that's not great. Well, but it's better than a 1-to-2 interception ratio, or a less than 1-to-1 interception ratio like Mahomes and Gardner Minshew have. Nobody's complaining about Mahomes. I mean, he's not playing great. I haven't watched a ton of Chiefs football, but they're 6-0.
I was going to say, and their record is again right. Maybe the days
of complimentary football, folks. That's what you got to play.
Yes. I mean, maybe.
Don't know if you've ever heard that term before.
Once or twice.
LaFleur says it every single week.
Luke Fickell says it every week too. So I get it from both coaches. Maybe the days of, a quarterback throwing 31 touchdowns to 4 interceptions a season are over. And maybe it was just because we saw it so much with Aaron Rodgers, because he didn't throw very many interceptions in his heyday with the Packers. A lot of touchdowns, very few interceptions. So, sometimes when you're staring that in your face for 16 years, you don't pay attention to what the rest of the trends in the National Football League are. And maybe it is just kind of an era of sling the ball around because of the devaluation of the running game in certain offenses. I don't know. It's fun to watch. It's frustrating when your team throws some interceptions, but it is fun football to watch overall as a fan. It's exciting.
Josh Allen, 12 touchdowns, 0 interceptions.
Okay, so there's one.
5-2 the Bills. Lamar Jackson's definitely the leading candidate for MVP. Josh Allen might be second. John said on our podcast today that he thinks Jordan Love, Josh Allen, Jared Goff are in that second tier right behind Lamar Jackson. I would put Goff and Josh Allen a little bit above Love, but Jordan Love right now is 5th in odds to win the MVP. It goes
Interesting.
Lamar, Mahomes, just because he's Patrick Mahomes. Then I think it's Josh Allen, and I know CJ Stroud and Jordan Love are tied for 5th. There was someone else in there. I think it might have been Jared Goff. But it's a quarterback award. I would say Derrick Henry might want to be up there too, but no running back's ever going to win it. Would be interesting to see if Jordan Love has a couple of clean games here, if he can climb those ranks. But Lamar Jackson's playing better than anybody in the NFL right now, I believe.
Somebody tried to tell me, and I forgot who it was. It wasn't on air, I don't think. But somebody tried to tell me once that Lamar Jackson is just not a Hall of Famer. He doesn't strike me as a Hall of Famer. Like, are you an idiot? He's got 2 MVPs and he's on his way to a 3rd. Lamar Jackson's on that track. He's firmly on that. I just kind of struck me when you were talking about Lamar Jackson there. He's playing with a gold jacket right now. Mahomes is playing with a gold jacket right now. There are some guys that are just already in. You win 2 MVPs, you're in. Now, he hasn't had the team success yet. Hasn't won the Super Bowl yet, but I mean, they've come close. They've been knocking on the door.
Nobody could use a Super Bowl title to, and this is, again, another narrative thing, to validate their legacy. And I think, it is important. If Rodgers knows what that second Super Bowl would do for his legacy. He ain't winning one this year, but that first Super Bowl for Lamar Jackson, whoo.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, Aaron Rodgers has been playing with a gold jacket for a decade, more than a decade.
I know.
So,
but I'm just saying to elevate him into an even upper echelon.
Sure. No, I get what you're saying.
But that's just talk. All right, on the other side, we'll wrap it up. Let's do some trade deadline talk. Trade deadline 2 weeks from today. Should the Packers buy? Should they sell? Should they stand pat? If you have any thoughts, 414-799-1973. Hit us up on the Well, don't call because apparently our phones aren't working because we couldn't talk to Wayne Larrabee today. So
you
just
can
text if you have any thoughts. Doug will read those off. If they're valid for air, I'll give my thoughts. He'll give his. We'll wrap up in a little bit. Stick with us right here on the Matt Schneidman Show on The Game. Now through October 27th, buy $75 or more of Iron Jock, and you'll receive 25% off your entire purchase with promo code OCT25. That's OCT25. Plus, Iron Jock will include a 3-pack of low-show socks for free. Make sure you have the socks in your cart, and they'll automatically be marked down to free. Go to ironjock.com for details. That's ironjoc.com. It's getting to be that time for Iron Jock, Doug. The silver ion technology. Going to start wearing some to the gym. It's getting chilly out. Wasn't chilly out today, but it's getting chilly out. I need some more Iron Jock. So if anyone out there is listening, who's our Iron Jock rep? I need some more.
Paul Hansen. Well, Paul Hansen owns Iron Jock. Pagel is the rep. So,
okay,
James, if you're out there, and he usually listens, so come on, James, do the right thing.
All right, so I am of the belief that the Packers should stand pat at the deadline. I can't really think of any positions that need upgrades desperately enough that are worth sacrificing future premium draft capital for. Ian Rappaport came out with a report last week that, Preston Smith and Andre Dillard are on the block, or teams have been calling about them. I don't know the exact language he used. But they would need more depth on the edge if that was the case. Brenton Cox has been inactive every game this season, I believe. So just leave Van Ness, Inagbari, and Rashawn Gary off the edge. Aaron Mosby, obviously, too, but maybe they'd want a more experienced guy in there. The Lions also going to be most likely trading for a guy like a Zadarius Smith, perhaps, because they obviously lost Aiden Hutchinson for quite some time, although, there have been reports he might be back for the Super Bowl. But other than defensive end, if they get rid of Smith, I don't see an area where the Packers, really need an upgrade. They're set at corner. They seem to like, Nixon out there. And if Nixon plays in the slot, they have, Stokes hasn't been great, but they have a guy in Carrington Valentine who did some really good stuff last year. Maybe a corner, if anything. But then again, you could put Nixon out there, have Bullard in the slot, and Evan Williams and McKinney at safety. So it might just be a depth corner. If you really want to have an embarrassment of riches, you go out, trade for a corner to have Jair in that other corner, then Keyshawn in the nickel, and then McKinney and Bullard at deep safety, and then just rotate, Nixon outside or, Nixon off the field, and Evan Williams at deep safety, Bullard in the slot. But my point is, it's not like a glaring need. I think you're set at linebacker. You're set at interior defensive line, especially once Devontae Wyatt comes back. You're obviously set at receiver, running back, quarterback. I think you're fine on offensive line and tight end as well. LaFleur told us during our last podcast when we sat down with him, or it might have been the first one, that he thinks this is the deepest team he's ever had. So on a deep team with pretty good top-end talent, you don't need to make any trades. So that's why I think they stand pat and should stand pat. But what do I know?
Well, you never know. I mean, if there's a guy out there, you mentioned Dillard, that if there's somebody I don't think there's anybody that's going to overpay, but 31 other general managers have Brian Gutekunst's phone number. It's not like the Packers would be selling or anything like that. They might be looking at, some of the depth for some of the future, but I don't know. They're so competitive this year. They're as good as anybody in the NFC. I think anybody in the NFC, certainly anybody in the NFC North, and my feelings on the division, anybody could win the Super Bowl from the NFC North. So yeah, I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense to go out and actively seek out any reinforcements, because I don't think there's anything that necessarily needs reinforcing. We've talked about the run game a little bit, so the rush defense, but who's going to be out there that's going to help, I guess, and what is the price going to be? I don't see them certainly being buyers, and I don't see them selling anything that they consider to be critical, mission critical, I guess, to getting to the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions need to make a trade because they just lost Aiden Hutchinson. The Packers haven't had any crippling injuries like that where, it's a frontline starter that you all of a sudden have a gaping hole at their position. The Packers just don't have that.
And sometimes that does happen, but it also sometimes happens after the trading deadline. So if you're the Lions, not that there's any kind of silver lining or saving grace or anything to the Aiden Hutchinson injury, but it did happen early in the season.
Right. And I think, a team like the Packers, who's right there in contention and maybe could use another piece to be pushed over the top, maybe common sense says, okay, trade for a guy to put you over the top. But just because you're right there on the line and maybe not the best team in the league, a tier lower than that, I don't think that necessarily means you have to not mortgage your future, but sacrifice an important part of the future in a draft pick. I still think draft picks are overrated down the line. And, I think teams should be more willing to give up premium draft capital for proven players in this league.
I agree.
But I still don't think it's necessary unless you really need it. I don't think the Packers really need it.
I mean, general managers by and large hate trading draft picks.
Oh, yeah. It's the unknown of draft picks that really intrigues general managers. Like, what if this player is going to be better than the one that we're trading for? But you don't know that. And you know that the guy you're trading for is proven. So Cooper Kupp, a guy on the trading block, reportedly, according to us at The Athletic, Diana Rossini, Mike Silver, and Jordan Rodriguez said the Rams want a second-round pick, and they'll eat some of Kupp's salary.
Okay.
Cooper Kupp is still a very, very good wide receiver in this league, coming off an injury that's kept him out a couple weeks, so maybe that changes part of the equation. But normally, if he's healthy, you say, yeah, second-round pick for Cooper Kupp, fine. Now, I understand there's a financial element to it and whatnot, so that's maybe a little different. But if you're a team trading for Cooper Kupp, you're a team that is going to get him to put you over the top. So to me, if he's healthy and he checks out and the Rams eat some of that salary, that's a no-brainer because the second-round receiver might never amount to anything. And even if he does, he might not amount to anything as good as Cooper Kupp to help you win now.
I always use the example, and again, I'm going into the Wayback Machine, so forgive me, but I always use the example of Tony Smith, not the basketball player from Marquette, but the football player from Southern Miss. Tony Smith is, to me, the best example of you just never know. Because Tony Smith, the football player from Southern Miss, is and should be someone that Packers fans know very well. He was draft pick of the Atlanta Falcons, who traded their third string quarterback to the Green Bay Packers for a player that they wound up picking in the first round by the name of Tony Smith. The third string quarterback that they traded was a guy named Brett Favre. Tony Smith lasted about 2 years in the NFL, racked up about 480 yards, and I don't think he scored a single touchdown in his NFL career. You just never know. There's no guarantee that a first-round draft choice is going to do squat in the NFL. And I know that Brett wasn't someone who was proven at the time, and he had gotten into the doghouse, but of Jerry Glanville, as I lose track of time, but we're almost out of time. It's just, you just never know. You just never know. And so roll the dice. If it's available, roll the dice. And I'll shut up now.
Still 2 weeks to the trade deadline. We'll keep an eye on that as we go along here tomorrow. Plenty more to talk about. Packers back in the facility preparing for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll be right back on this station right here at 6. He's Doug. I'm Matt. Appreciate you for listening.